Good morning, howdy. Thank you all for joining us for the spring Cayuse Proposals S2S Researcher Informational session. I hope everybody is staying warm and dry. It's pretty nasty outside, so I do apologize in advance if there are connectivity issues. If we have them and they persist, we will reschedule for a very near future date. To get started, we're going to introduce ourselves, and then Tyson is going to go through some background information about Cayuse and Maestro and SRS, just a little background information on the product. So my name is Lyndall Arsenault. I'm a senior proposal administrator and team lead, specifically for the TAMU and TAMU Galveston pre-award team.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Tyson Salas, and I'm a proposal administrator 1 with Sponsored Research Services. Okay, so getting started. For those that may not know, S2S stands for System to System. These programs offer an online solution by communicating and submitting proposals via grants.gov, as opposed to the many various submission portals for each sponsor, or via grants.gov workspace. The major benefit to Cayuse is its ability to integrate with an institution's current systems or programs, such as Maestro, or with other electronic research administration solutions. This helps mitigate administrative as well as research-related burdens for researchers preparing proposals for interview review and approval. Where there are many S2S options available, Cayuse provides the most efficient integration with Maestro. Cayuse supports 100% of grants.gov research proposal opportunities, which means we have the ability to utilize Cayuse for all grants.gov opportunities. Since its implementation in 2019, we have expanded the sponsors for which we utilize Cayuse, and with a year-to-date successful submission total of over 3,000 proposals to federal sponsors.
So when it comes to the utilization of Proposals S2S, there are quite a few benefits to the PIs as well as the administrative staff that assist PIs in the preparation of proposals for submission. One of those, it would be a single point of entry for federal submissions to sponsors such as NIH, DOE, DOD, USDA, just to name a few. PIs are provided the necessary permissions, the access permissions to each application by the proposal administrator upon initiation of the application after it's created in Maestro. So they'll log the proposal in Maestro, which I'm sure you're all familiar with seeing. And then once that's created, we initiate the application in Cayuse on our end, and then provide application permissions to each individual to access the proposal. For those of you researchers and PIs who prefer to be very hands-on with your proposal preparation, including uploading your own documents and things like that, Proposals S2S provides a very seamless access point through Maestro, our internal homegrown system of record. That's typically what we're in the most is Maestro. And so to have a seamless transition from one program to another, very, very useful, very user-friendly, and prevents any kind of confusion or any kind of back and forth between multiple submission programs. Cayuse also provides some pretty user-friendly navigation, which we will demonstrate here in a few minutes. Alternatively, if you would rather have your proposal administrator upload your documents, that's fine. That is a service that SRS provides. That is a service SRS provides if given enough time. I do want to point out that we ask that you reference our proposal submission guidelines, which are available on our website. And I'm actually providing the link here in the chat as well. This document just provides information on timelines as well as some other information regarding proposal submission expectations. So we do ask that that information is reviewed prior to submitting a proposal, just so that you're aware of the amount of lead time and review time that SRS is asking for to ensure that the proposal is submitted as successfully as possible. As an additional reminder to that, if you are going to request your proposal administrator to upload your documents, those must be provided in their final format. So if the sponsor requires them in PDF, Excel, Word, whatever the sponsor is requiring for submission, your proposal administrator would need it in that final format to upload for you. Another major benefit of utilizing proposals S2S for submission, in my opinion, it's probably the best part, is the real-time validations for the proposal. Compliance validations are constantly running in the application. So as the application is completed, validation errors and warnings and little information tags are going to drop off in real time. So it's pretty gratifying to see as you're working through your application, seeing those errors and warnings get, that number get lower and lower. It's pretty satisfying. You can also navigate directly to any error or warning by clicking the hyperlinked text. And you can kind of see this in the screenshot here, but we'll definitely look at that a little bit closer in our demonstration. This will take you directly to the field or form that is causing the error or warning so that it may be addressed from any page that you may be currently on. These rolling validations are actually predetermined based on the sponsor that is selected whenever we create the application in Maestro. And it's automatic. There's no manual selection. And so there's no need to change the validation base unless absolutely necessary. But as you can see by the other screenshot we have on this slide, Cayuse does have in their programming validation rules or codes for a variety of sponsors. These are all generic compliance validations. So for example, the NSF validations are based on the PAPPG. NIH is based on the sort of general NIH guidelines. But we'll look at further whenever we get into the demo, sort of how Cayuse is sort of mitigating not being able to run those program-specific validations. But we'll talk about that a little bit.
Okay, so currently there are a number of sponsors providing, those sponsors providing grants.gov and other ERA post-submission solutions. SRS is utilizing Cayuse for NIH proposals at this time. Other sponsors such as DOD, DOE, and their various branches have solely utilized grants.gov for some time as well. These proposals actually are also submitted using Cayuse. With that in mind, the implementation of Cayuse also means reducing points of entry when completing and submitting an application. We can access the Cayuse application, you as the PI, you can access the Cayuse application directly via Maestro and SSO as well, which is the single sign-on.
There is a possibility, I will add, that these available sponsors that we are submitting to may expand. At this time, there are a select few sponsors that we don't submit through Cayuse just because of the their own systems tend to be a little bit more comprehensive in terms of how they're reviewing proposals and things like that. But that may change. We may expand on what sponsors we are including in our submission pool. Alrighty, so how do you get to Cayuse from Maestro? This is going to start our demonstration portion. So I'm actually going to end the slides, and we're going to go to Maestro, and we're going to dive right into demonstration. So in just a moment. Okay. Can everyone still see my screen?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, I can see it.
Perfect. Also, I will add, I see that a question just came in. Just to get through the demonstration, we'll go through the chat and answer all questions at the end of the demonstration, just to keep the flow going. So So how do we get to Cayuse from the Maestro researcher dashboard? So everybody should be fairly familiar if you haven't submitted a proposal or if you haven't been in Maestro yet as new faculty or new researcher. This is what the researcher dashboard looks like. From here, you'll select proposal. And then it'll give you a list of all the proposals that you are PI and I believe co-PI on as well. You'll select the one that you are looking to get into to edit just by clicking the proposal number. And then this is what the proposal record is going to look like from the researcher perspective. As I mentioned before, your proposal administrator is going to initiate your application in Cayuse and then give you the permissions to access it yourself. If they haven't done that yet, you'll notice that there's a little horse icon with Cayuse next to it. This will not be there. If your application hasn't been created or you haven't been given permissions to it, this just won't be available as an option. But as long as it's created and you have permissions, you can just click Cayuse and open. Sometimes it may make you log in again. And then this is going to be the view once you get into the Cayuse application. One thing I do want to note is when you open it, there is a possibility that the application is locked. Unfortunately, only one person can be in the application at any given time. So if your proposal administrator is in there filling out forms, completing the budget, or uploading anything, if you're trying to access it, there will be a little padlock up here in the upper information area that'll say who has it locked and that it is locked. There's not an option to break the lock, so you will need to contact your proposal administrator, whoever is in the application, and just say, hey, I need to get into it. Let them finish up whatever they're doing, save, get out of it, and then you can access it at that point. So from here, it's pretty user-friendly. If you're familiar with an NIH application, this looks exactly like an NIH application with a slightly different interface. All the left-hand navigation takes you to all the various forms required for that application. And I will note that this is the same sort of process for any other grants.gov application. The packages are put together and then downloaded by Cayuse from grants.gov. So the packages in the Cayuse application platform are the same packages that you will download from grants.gov. There's no deviation, there's no difference. They're the same form, same packages. The grayed out checkboxes here are mandatory forms determined by the sponsor. Anything that doesn't have a checkbox already checked is optional. So if you're familiar with NIH, depending on the threshold of your budget, you might be using a detailed or a modular. I know Tyson's going to touch on that here in a few minutes. But that would be, you would select which budget form is the most appropriate for your application. Most of the time, your PA, your proposal administrator, is going to be making this selection based on the budget and the threshold. But to get from form to form, you can click the form title, and it'll just take you to the first page of the form if there are multiple pages. For example, the SF424 research and related form is 2 pages. And you can see that it has 1 and 2. Clicking 2 will just take you to the next page. If you click the title, the form title, it just takes you automatically to the first page. Most of this, your proposal administrator will take care of. So things like the cover sheet, performance site, other project information, with the exception of some of these compliance questions, depending on the package and the sponsor that you're submitting to. There may be some forms that your proposal administrator may ask for feedback or information for. But this is just an overview of the navigation. You can, like I said, you can click through all of these. If any changes are made in terms of, saving information. When you click from form to form, it does automatically save. You don't have to manually save. However, if you do not, for example, if I were to make a change here, if I were to make any change on the form, you'll see a little floppy disk icon, a little save icon. Clicking out of the form into another form page will automatically save. However, if I were to exit this application by clicking log out over here, which will take me back to Maestro automatically, if I exit without saving, that information that I did change would not be saved. So just be sure that you don't have a save icon up here sort of as you're exiting the application. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Tyson to talk about document upload.
Okay, so when uploading documents, it's pretty straightforward. We ask that you actually, with any document you upload, make sure it's the final version. We try not to use the draft version, only to try to mitigate confusion. But however, and if you ever make any changes to that particular attachment, you can always re-upload it. So that is actually the approach that we ask everyone to try to follow regarding uploading attachments. Now, at this stage, when you're preparing to upload your attachment, you can choose choose your attachment. And if you get to this point and you realize, hey, that is not the correct name, I need to change the name so that way it coincides or it complies with what the agency, the naming convention, if the agency requires the naming convention, you can always change it at this point. You don't have to delete or, in order to change the name, you can do it at this point and click upload. And there you have it. And I would actually recommend that you save, because I have attached one or two and got out, and even though it saves, but I just make a habit of just saving after each time after I attach a document. So that's pretty much the gist regarding attaching documents. So the next thing component I want to cover is budgets. So, okay, so the R&R, this is the research and related budget, which is the standard budget for grants.gov submissions. And what you'll realize is if actually your proposed administrator will assist or will upload the budget information, the budget and the final budget justification for you. However, if you choose to upload budget information, that's fine as well. But what you will notice is the internal Excel spreadsheet that we prepare for API actually coincides a great deal with the research and related budget form. So you can literally just open your attachment, your budget your Excel budget that's been prepared, and upload the information using that spreadsheet. So in each, I'm sorry. Kind of lost you. My screen blipped, sorry. Okay, so and also when you upload the information, you can actually copy your budget periods, or you can do an escalation as well. So yes, thank you. So you can do this with any line item. You just enable it. And if you want to include an escalation of 3%, 3 to 5%, it will actually copy over the amount from the previous budget period, which in this case is budget period 1. And if it's a multi-year project, it will escalate those line items selected per the percentage that you added next to that line item, which is a very neat feature. Cancel, yes. And as I stated, a lot of some of these fields will be populated from your main page, such as your start date. Sometimes, every now and then, I have come across, situations where it's not so, and I have to input that information. However, like I said, it's a standard budget, pretty straightforward. And there was one other section that I wanted to cover. When you're adding the budget information for your salary, you have to remember you do have to include the yearly salary amount, and we use calendar months. So you want to make sure you include that information in order for it to calculate correctly as far as the total amounts. Now, even though the research and related budget form is the standard grants.gov budget form, for NIH submissions, there is a modular budget. Now, this is a very, very straightforward budget. It's not as detailed as the research and related budget. However, you can use this, but you want to really pay close attention to your funding opportunity announcement, because most opportunities, NIH opportunities, will allow you to use the modular budget, but there are some that will not allow you to use the modular budget. You have to use the research and related. For like the R1s, you have to use research and related. And the modular budget, it's different. It's different than what most people are accustomed to seeing. But you can add. You have to add amounts in increments of 25,000. So as Linda stated previously, your proposed administrator, we will assist with uploading any of the budget information, as well as other attachments as well. And we don't mind explaining to you why this particular budget form looks so different. So this seems to be the one that a lot of people, even though it's not detailed, a lot of people have a number of questions regarding it. Almost feels as though you're leaving something out. And that's pretty, yeah.
Okay. I will add one note about the budgets. It's certainly not expected for PIs to complete the budget components in the application package. We understand that some researchers are a little bit more hands-on when preparing their applications. And so the NIH budget, the R&R budget, is a really sort of easy one to transfer information from our budget spreadsheet. But I just wanted to add, it's not an expectation. Your proposal administrator generally will just automatically handle it. And so that should be taken care of at that time. Okay, apologies for pulling that up. Okay, so I do want to talk a little bit more about the rolling validations down here. More so just to show kind of that as you upload things, they tend, the errors tend to go away. For example, the specific aims attachment, this, is a standard NIH application package. The specific aims attachment is required. So when I add a specific aims file, upload, and so you'll see that specific aims error has now disappeared. Same thing would happen with the research strategy, with any of the information fields that have to be completed. As you complete those items, these things drop off. Something that I do want to just note, as sometimes seeing a bunch of errors and warnings can be really, really upsetting, because nobody wants errors in their application, particularly if you're coming up to submission and you think you've uploaded everything, but you're still getting errors on your application. I do want to point out that, again, Cayuse does not run program-specific validations. So if you are working on a proposal that part of the program guidelines specifically to that, that IC or that solicitation, For example, NIH maybe it tells you that your research strategy can be 15 pages instead of 12, just because of the size of the program. That is not something that Cayuse is going to run a validation on. So it's going to give you an error that your research strategy exceeds 12 pages for an R01. When you do the validations for grants.gov prior to submission, your PA will probably note that there are no errors, but you can clearly see errors here. Something to keep in mind is these things that we've heard referenced as tags. So this is tagged as an NIH specific validation or compliance validation run. So try to find a good one. So for example, a bio sketch is a standard requirement for an NIH application. But it's something that if it weren't included, grants.gov would let that go through, as it's not necessarily a requirement for the package or for the form. So if for some reason, your program says, a bio sketch is not needed, you don't have to upload one, depending on the program, this would likely pass grants.gov validations and NIH validations. However, if it were missing and it were required, it would not get past ERA Commons once NIH downloads it from grants.gov. Again, same thing with things like page limits. If your solicitation says you can exceed a page limit, then that's probably going to have that NIH tag in the error. At which point, double check with your proposal administrator, double check your program solicitation. As long as you're following that, you should be in the clear. And then one item I do want to note on uploads, if you ever need to change your document upload or update it for any reason, again, like Tyson said, we don't really encourage the use of draft. If you do use draft, just know that that is not a final document. It does not go to the sponsor. So to avoid confusion and potentially missing something, we just don't recommend using the draft function. That said, it is available to you if you feel comfortable with it. That's kind of up to you. I can tell you that we proposal administrators don't use the draft function. Everything goes into final. If we have to re-upload something, we just click manage, and then we choose final again, select the revised document, and then change the name if we have to change the name, and then upload. I will note, Tyson mentioned that when you do upload documents, you can change the name in the attachment name field. Once that document is uploaded, however, you cannot change the name. So if you do need to change the name, you do need to re-upload the file, change the name, and then upload that. Okay. Finally, I do want to talk about the proposal summary section, just because we do get a lot of questions about the proposal summary section, particularly things that are in the summary pages, as well as supporting documents. Proposal summary, this section is strictly internal. It does not go to the sponsor. It does not go anywhere past us. We actually use the proposal summary pages. This is if you print this, it's roughly a 2-page document. We actually use this as our routing package cover pages. So if you are working on a proposal and you get the routing notification that it needs your approval, and it is being submitted in Cayuse, generally the routing package should contain these 2 first pages. And it just has some generic information such as sponsor, title, PI. It has, first budget period effort, things like that. And then has some other sort of program information, such as, the type of proposal. Is it going to be a grant, a contract, a cooperative agreement? What kind of application is it? What type of project is it? Basic research or applied research? And generally all of that information we can kind of collect from the solicitation or from the RFP. Or from the PI, or from you, the PI, asking the information, particularly about the type of research, for example, is it basic or applied? This collects information for things like animal subjects and human subjects and, radioactive material and all those other compliance items that might need to be reviewed and addressed if the program or if the project is awarded, such as like IRD, IACUC, biosafety, things like that. Cost sharing information is also included here. So if there is a cost sharing component, for example, NIH, we do capture salary cap. For DOE, there's often a 20% match requirement. That information would also be captured here, as well as in the Maestro record. And then some export control information. So as I mentioned, this is completely an internal document. None of this goes to the sponsor at all. Same thing with supporting documents. This is generally where we upload typically our budget file, our budget justification, scope of work, RFP, anything that we would be including with the routing package, because we do actually use Cayuse to generate the routing packages. And so you'll probably notice that information here in supporting documents. But again, that does not go to the sponsor. None of this information gets submitted to the sponsor, totally internal, just for our review purposes, our internal purposes only. And then the proposal management section is generally more geared toward administrative. So your SRS proposal administrator is going to be paying closer attention to this information, but you have access to it. The electronic submission, this actually has the opportunity details. So it tells you the opportunity title, what you're applying to, opportunity number, competition ID actually tells you what forms type you're using. This is particularly important for NIH as they change their form types every year, roughly. So for example, this year they changed from forms E, G to H, or possibly the other way around. This might be an older application, but that's going to tell you what forms package that you have and to ensure that that is the appropriate forms package that you need. So just some opportunity details here. And then once you submit, proposal submission history will have the S2S tracking number and the grant. It'll also have the grants.gov tracking number available. By clicking that, it actually does give you an update on the submission process, but it's not as detailed as you might see it in grants.gov. It just kind of tells you that S2S has validated it, grants.gov has validated it, and then it tells you that an agency tracking number has been assigned once the application is received successfully by the agency. And then electronic submission, that's totally internal. SRS will take care of that. I do believe you have the option to validate the proposal. This will actually run validation on the whole application as it relates to grants.gov. So the validate proposal is really running a final check. Some of the general guideline validations may be included in there, but primarily it's running for grants.gov to ensure grants.gov will accept it without any errors or kicking it back or anything like that. And then proposal history just gives you a breakdown. It's like an audit trail for who's done what, who's edited what, and when. The system, I believe, is on Eastern time. So keep that in mind whenever you're looking at the times at which things are updated or changed. Okay. And then to exit your application. So again, as you're going through, just make sure you're saving pretty regularly, either automatically or manually. And then to exit the application, you just click log out. And then it takes you back to Maestro, and it'll actually it should take you back to the proposal record itself. I have primarily administrator access, so it's taking me back to my administrator search screen from the researcher portal, but it should take you back to the application record in Maestro automatically. So that is pretty much our demo. Let's see. see what questions we have. Can you let us know if workflow is the same as it's always been, or if it has changed? Do we still submit to SRS and they enter it into the system? And if Cayuse is mandatory for submissions? No, the workflow, yes, the workflow should be the same. There's no real change in who's doing what. There's just a different interface that we're working in. So your proposal administrator will still handle everything, particularly, if you want them to handle document upload. We generally, for the most part, handle budgets, things like that. You have a little bit more freedom to complete things yourself. I think that's kind of the big difference. Certainly not required, but you have the option to do it yourself if you like to. And then as far as is Cayuse mandatory for submissions? Yes, we are using Cayuse solely for submission to NIH unless otherwise stated that it's not allowed or that it's not compatible with grants.gov. There are some programs with NIH that require the use of assist or require the use of directly submitting through ERA Commons. Those are, of course, exceptions. Those are dictated by the sponsor. If it is a grants.gov submission, we are using Cayuse. Does Cayuse accept an upload of an SRS budget file? Or if the PI wants to complete the Cayuse budget form, must a PI manually transfer each item from an SRS file into Cayuse? It does accept the budget file in the supporting documents, but if you're asking, does it upload and transfer the information into a form? No. If the PI does want to complete the Cayuse budget form, you do have to manually transfer the information. Again, PIs completing the budget is not generally an expectation. We just understand that some PIs are a little bit more hands-on with completing their application. Generally, this is something your proposal administrator will handle. Does Cayuse allow a PI to choose between two different NIH forms packages if NIH accepts both forms packages during a certain time window? Yes, that's not done in Cayuse. That's actually done in Maestro. And your proposal administrator will generally choose the most appropriate forms package. When we create the application in Maestro and then create the application in Cayuse, if there are two different package types, as during the NIH window, before they require the newest one, there are two forms package options. And before we can create the application in Cayuse, it does give us both of those options, and then you select which one to apply to. Yeah, so you can choose the most current one before it's required. Or if you've already created one in the previous one and it's still within that window, then you don't have to change it. Does the export function allow a PI to archive all components of a proposal? If not, how can a PI obtain all components of a proposal for storage outside of Cayuse? So the export function, so it's actually the print function that you're probably going to want besides export. Export actually generates a .cayuse file that is generally used for sharing proposals with other Cayuse users. So we actually use the opposite, the import function, when we are entering subaward components. So rather than completing the like subaward budget ourselves or having an external user trying to give them access to the application, we actually use the import function with the subaward budget by uploading the budget and having all the information there. So what you'd be looking for at that point is actually the print function. And when you do print, let me actually exit. That's actually a good demonstration point.
Mhm.
Let me just get back to the application. So to print, there's a print icon here, but you do have to select the forms that you want to include. You can select all, you can manually select which ones. You can also just select included forms. This will actually automatically just check the forms that are included in the application that you submitted, so that you don't have to manually include or manually not include forms that were not submitted. And then you just generate PDF, and it gives you a compiled PDF of all of the application components. It will not, depending on the sponsor and depending on how that information gets to the sponsor, it may not be in the same order. For example, NIH applications. In ERA Commons, they're in a slightly different order than they will generate here. That's not a problem. That's not an issue. The sponsor sites, so Assist, eBrout, CAMS, they will order the applications automatically from their system. So you don't have to worry about them being in a wrong order or anything like that, but it does give you a complete compilation of the application components. Alternatively, Maestro actually automatically downloads the entire grants.gov package after submission. So that full compiled document will actually be available in Maestro under final submitted documents in the document section of the record. Is there PI profile information input such as a bio? Yes, there are. So under key persons, this is generally where you add key personnel, where you'll add your multi-PIs, your co-investigators, your co-PIs, depending on the sponsor, any other sort of senior personnel. And here is where we would include our biosketch. So it's the same as an R&R key persons form that you'd have in a grants.gov package or on Assist. Document upload is the same, add, select your biosketch, upload. And then all of this information is actually pre-populated or automatically populated, excuse me, based on the profile that was created for you, sort of automatically. When we implemented, we did a large data migration from connecting with our HR. And so that automatically pulls everybody in. And we had some manual fixing to make sure the addresses were pulling in correctly as well. If for some reason your information is not pulled into Cayuse, we actually have a process internally of manually creating profiles, entering the address, entering the department information, phone number, email address, all of that. So we have a manual process for that, but that automatically populates these forms. Stored for multiple submissions. That's actually a really, really good question. So there is an option. You as the individual connected. So we also have to create user profiles, which are different from the people profiles that populate the application. When we create user profiles, that is actually what connects your profile to single sign-on and what gives you the opportunity to log in using your single sign-on and access the application. So through that, you actually have access to your own information profile. So I will just pull up mine, for example. So because you have access to this, you can actually store biosketches, draft biosketches for use in future proposals, and you can store up to as many as you like. So you can add, this is my, NSF biosketch, or I'll tell you what I'll do. This is my NIH biosketch dated 4/6/23. That was the last time I updated it. And just click next, browse, select your document, next. If you had a Word, so like if you uploaded a PDF and your source file was in Word, for example, you could actually input the source file, the Word document, for later editing or anything like that as the sort of original file that you made changes to. You can do that. I'm not going to do that right now. I'm just going to click done. And so now I have a bio sketch attached to my personal profile. So when I go back to my proposal, I can actually add bio sketch. And in the event that I had multiple bio sketches, multiple bio sketch templates or multiple bio sketches for different sponsors, I could actually select which one I want to import. And then that'll just pull in the bio sketch that I have uploaded. It's actually a really, really fun little component of Cayuse, one that I don't think gets utilized very often. I don't think it gets utilized very often. It's not very well known that it can do that, but it can.
Right, I agree.
Next question. What is the proposal summary used for? If it is only internal, do we need to enter documents there, or is that used by the proposal administrator? It is primarily used by the proposal administrators and by SRS, particularly for preparing the routing package that is reviewed prior to proposal submission. And it puts all of the sort of proposal information in one place in the routing package. This information also is, however, kind of dispersed throughout the Maestro record. So it kind of just puts it all in one place in the routing package. And then as far as the supporting documents, this is actually, like I said, what our proposal administrators use to upload the budget and budget justification, just to kind of, well, we can import it from Cayuse. So it helps have for us administrators, have everything sort of in Cayuse, and then we can kind of go back to Maestro as we're getting ready to complete the, get the routing started and complete the application and everything. Rather than having to double upload things, we can actually just import the documents from Cayuse. And so that's just an administrative perk. There's not really anything other than if for some reason, the PI wanted to have something in here to complete the record or something, it's primarily used for the proposal administrators at SRS. This session's video recording will be made available on our website. Within the week, I do want to, give it a good look, but it will be available on our website within the next week. And I will send an email out to the participants that it is available once it is available, as well as perhaps send it out on the listserv that it is now available for viewing. Any other questions or anything else that you'd like to sort of see demonstrated or anything like that?
Can you tell me again how you got to the profile section?
Of course. So this is going to be dependent on, I will say this is going to be dependent on what access level you have in your profile, in your user profile. You should only have access to your profile, but if you just go to people, the people tab here, you will have to get to this through from Maestro. So you will have to open an application that you're currently working on or previously worked on to get to this part. But up here in the ribbon, you just go to people and then you search. You may have to search for your name. It may just show up as a recently viewed, since that may be the only one that you have access to. But then you just open it and then you can actually add. This is actually something that I didn't mention, but you can actually add all of your IDs. So like for NIH, for example, you have to add your NIH Commons ID in the credentials field. If this is here, it will auto-populate. So we don't have to worry about missing it. We don't have to worry about overlooking it or anything like that. Same thing for NASA and NSF. However, at this time, we are not using Cayuse for NASA and NSF submissions. And then so bio sketches, you can add, I'll just add a second. I'll just say, was my DOE bio sketch. And so now I have 2 bio sketches depending on who I'm submitting to. And whenever I'm in the application package itself, I can select either one. It'll come up in that dropdown. And so that you just get back to people, and then to exit, because the same thing with proposals, only one person can be in the people profiles as well. So my recommendation before you move on back to the proposal or to another section or anything like that, just click the little people breadcrumb item, and that just takes you back to the people list, thereby unlocking the profile. So if your proposal administrator needed to get into it for any reason to update an email address or an address or whatever the case may be, that's not locked for them.
Thank
Is there
you.
any other reason, useful reason that we would get into the user profile? You focused on file sketches. It looks like there might be other useful tidbits in there.
So yeah, so like I said, so the IDs are really handy to have included if you needed to add it. You can add any of your IDs at that point. Again, things like degrees and demographics, those would automatically populate certain forms if they were completed. I believe the demographics would probably auto-populate the personal data forms, which are not used for NIH, but they are used for some like Department of Defense, some other federal agencies may use the personal data form. This information is generally what's asked for on it. So if you did have this filled out, it might auto-populate that form. So that would be handy. The bio sketches is really the big one. It's really the most handy, but I will say, if you are going to use this function, it has to be updated. So if you update your bio sketch, you need to update it in Cayuse as well. So while it does have a functionality that's really beneficial, it does have to be maintained. So that's really the primary benefit, is that what's in this profile populates the application. So the more complete the profile is, the more complete your application is just automatically going to be. Any other questions? If you do have any questions, I'm going to throw up my our contact information. If you do have any questions, please feel free to contact myself or Tyson. You can contact us directly with any questions you may have. Alternatively, you can send them to our proposals inbox. We do have that is monitored, so we will be able to get those questions. But you're more than welcome to reach out to either of us individually with any questions you may have. We also are willing to provide separate training. So if you have a department or a group of researchers that you'd like to do a sort of separate training, or if there's a specific sponsor you want to kind of look at and get training on, we can certainly look into doing that as well. Thank you so much, guys. We're going to hang around for just another couple of minutes. I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording, but we'll hang around for another couple of minutes in case there are any sort of last minute questions or anything like that.